Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today we are starting episode 2 of our outboard motor cowling repair. Now, if you had tuned in for the previous episode, you can see where we did some extensive structural fiberglass repair. We used a 2-part epoxy, 2-to-1 epoxy from our friends there at Total Boat to help us repair that. But now we are into the fairing, shaping, and phase of getting ready for a top coat and a clear coat. And we're going to be using some of the 3M dry guide coat, kind of the magic dust here. This is one of those little tricks of the trade that helps you see imperfections and find little highs and lows. And if you've been following the channel, you know that this is something we've used in our bag of tricks for several of our projects. But it just basically helps us to see where we have sanded and where there are little imperfections and areas that might need touch up. Now, what we have on here, we had previously sprayed that with just an aerosol, a 1-part aerosol primer. That's a Quicksilver brand. There's different brands. Sometimes we're going to be using the Yamaha Yamalube factory color, and then we're going to be using some of the Color Right clear as a finish. But the wet sanding and blocking is one of the final phases to getting things ready. Now, we are using some 600, hope y'all can see that. That's some 600 grit from our friends there at 3M as well. A little bit of water with just like 1 drop of soap in it is all you're going to need to kind of help find some of those highs and lows and prep this for our finish coat. Now, when we had sprayed our primer earlier, there were a few little runs and a few little low spots, but this 600 should take it right out. Now, some folks may choose to use something a little bit coarser. I would imagine 400 could work, but I'm going to try to blend this up into the existing color. So we're not painting the whole cowling today. Kind of one of those deals where it's a judgment call. I know some people may think that it would be better, or they may prefer to paint the whole cowling on an area such as this, and that's a personal thing. If you choose to do that, that's quite all right as well. Take considerably more work and more effort to do so, but we're using this 600 with just real light pressure, and we're sanding in multiple directions. Sometimes I will sand across. Most of the time we're going to be sanding in line, just nice long smooth passes. You can already see how it's really starting to feather that in very nicely. And the guide coat will show you little ripples and imperfections and little pinholes. You can see we need a little more sanding right in there. There's a bit of shadowing. This was kind of a tricky area to repair because we got so many little contours and shapes there. You don't want to go too far. You want to stay off of the edges as well. These little body lines and creases, we want to avoid those with our block because it is very, very easy to sand right through, even with 600 grit. You can see here again, we had a little bit of a run there where I had to hit that with the blade, a putty blade. The guide coat shows you so easily where you've got those highs and lows. Looking better already. Now, I'm not going to go too crazy with this. I want to move right on down. Nice, long, smooth passes. Can really hear the 600 cutting initially. And I'd like to take this opportunity to welcome everybody to the channel once again. If you're new here, my name is Joe Buskins. This is our family's boat shop. I'm a 2nd-generation professional boat builder and a 100-ton licensed captain. And this motor cowling that we're working on goes in on our 29-foot charter boat that we run during the warmer months of the year. During the winter months, we are typically here in the boat shop doing boat repairs and making videos for you folks at home. Just want to thank everybody for tuning in. Welcome everybody here. This is one of many videos that we have. We have over 150 videos here on the channel. Lots of DIY how-to, Gelcoat, fiberglass. This is the first outboard motor repair video that we have done. This is on my personal, this is on my personal boat. It happened one day while we were out on a charter. I've had a few questions. How did this happen? And basically we had a big fish on and he ran underneath the boat, and sometimes we'll trim the motor up, and I trimmed it up a little bit too far and I got into my rod holders there on my back seat. That was not long after we had installed the new jump seat there, and I trimmed the motor up a little too far. So I guess you could say it was operator error. But it happens to the best of us. It's just kind of one of those things. These little 3M blocks, I know I've said it a bunch of times here on the channel, but if you don't have one of these little small hook it sanding blocks, that is money well spent. And I'll be sure to put a link below our video's description. We've got a nice Amazon store now for you folks at home. You can find everything we're using on the channel. Makes it nice and easy. And I'm going to do a little bit of a circular motion. We're trying to move all around, and we're trying to change direction as we sand. Otherwise, you'll get grooves and lines if you just stay on one track. Sometimes people get fixated on one area and they just sand like crazy. And you got to be careful doing that, because you will sand too far. You can see right here, we've got a little bit of our guide coat yet, and we're on this body line. So I gotta be careful at this point about going too far, getting too aggressive, because this is the final sand. I know some folks are inclined to replace or remove the decals, and I would say if you were painting the whole cowling, that would probably be a good idea. You can get the Yamaha decals as a kit, but our damage is mostly away from the decals, and I feel like I can feather it in without much of an issue, save a little bit of time, a little bit of money, but you certainly could do that at home. I know may get someone comment on that, but we're just trying to get this boat operational again, get this cowling looking good, because it is getting nice and warm, and we are starting to run more charters and get out on the water and catch some nice big fish. We just need this thing looking decent for our clients. All right, now you can see how good of a job the guide coat did. It really highlights. It tells you how far to go and when to stop. We know now that we've more or less got everything with 600. We got a little bit of a shadow right there. We got just a little bit kind of over this edge. Just gonna carefully roll it. Roll it around just a little bit. Mindful to stay off the decals. Gotta be careful on this crease up here too, because it's very, very easy to sand. Sand too far. You don't want to do that. Don't want to go through any further than you have to. We got perfect conditions for this. Generally temperatures in the mid 70s to 80s is pretty ideal for this kind of work. Most of the materials you use are going to have detailed directions or instructions on the back, and I highly recommend you just follow those directions kind of pertaining to your particular situation. And just nice and easy. We'll sand a little more till we're got some of that guide coat blended in. Body work is one of those things that it's hard to get the full grasp of it in a little short video. I know a lot of folks are used to the little high speed, sped up and highly edited videos, but a lot of this stuff you really need a full length video to grasp how much time, or else you'll kind of be surprised. You'll think maybe you're doing something wrong, but in reality you can have quite a few hours involved in a project like this. I'm going to stand out a little from this edge because we are going to be doing some clear coat. Now, I had cleaned this top thoroughly beforehand, and we did a de-waxer. We used some of the Total Boat, the de-waxer and surface prep for all of this. Some folks will use alcohol. Some people will use different thinners, naphtha and different stuff. But I kind of like to use something that's designed for de-waxing, something that's specific. We do use a lot of acetone in the shop when we're doing fiberglass work. So you got to be careful with acetone on a lot of these one-part primers. It'll melt it. It's too aggressive, and it will actually melt your primer off of there, and that would be a big disappointment if you've done all this work and then your solvent ate away all your primer coat. All right, that's looking really, really nice there, folks. Now, I mentioned this again in our last video, but sometimes your hands can feel things that your eyes can't see. And with body work, sometimes it's not a bad idea to run your hand over the surface and see if you feel any ripples. Although the 3M guide coat is really good at helping you see some of that stuff. So that feels pretty good to me. Pretty good for sure. There's a couple little spots right there that I might go a little deeper. I don't know if the camera will pick that up, but they are tiny, and that may not matter. Again, if you got this thing, if you're just trying to get going fishing, you could probably shortcut a little bit here on the fairing and shaping and body work, but I wanted to show this in high detail and high quality for folks that really want to try to get back as close to perfect. I will tell you folks, perfection is difficult, and sometimes it'll make you crazy. So there is a point sometimes where you're just like, you know, it's right, it's good. Perfection, I mean, if that's your thing and you want to push for that, then by all means, but we're just shooting for really a high quality job here. But we don't want to make ourselves crazy in the process. Now I'm going to shift over to a slightly different. Again, we're using some of the wet or dry. That's 3M. That's a 600 grit. I'm using a little bit of a foam block that I made, and it's got a radius or a rounded contour on it on that one edge that I had kind of used that when I was shaping this up, this body line here, and it's not going to take much. All we're trying to do is get beyond the guide coat and maybe any little ripples or imperfections there. We're not really trying to remove much material at all. Yeah, see that, how easily, that is very light pressure, minimal effort, and it is already pretty much taking the guide coat down. Remember to be super careful of the corners. It is very easy on these little body lines and creases to sand too much. I'm going to kind of come in here and do a little bit. trying to feather that primer in. Sometimes you have a little edge there that it just needs to be blended out a few inches away from the actual repair, so that when you add your color coat, you can transition. You don't want a hard, abrupt stop. If you can kind of feather it, it'll help the color blend a little better, because sometimes you gotta, even if it's exactly the same paint code, if your motor's been out in the sun quite a bit, if it's an older motor, it may have some oxidation or may have changed colors a bit from the factory can. Just kind of expect that. But if you blend it or transition it, you kind of use the corners and curves of the shape itself to blend, it'll be a little more forgiving. Even if you got a slight color difference in the materials, it'll still look really nice. You can see the guide coat's working for me there. I got just a little ripple, right? Just want to sand until the guide coat is gone. It's in the details though, folks. You know, doing a good job. It doesn't typically happen super fast, and I wish it did. I know everybody wants kind of instant gratification these days and everything to be quick and easy, but this can be very satisfying work to do. Changing blocks over there again so that we can you can make an assortment of blocks. I've got a little bucket of blocks that we've made over the years, some different wood blocks and foam blocks and different shapes and contours for different jobs. That's something relatively cheap and easy to do for the DIYers at home, which that is mostly what this channel is about. I know we got some pros out there, and obviously you've probably got your own techniques, and if you got a, you know, if you would prefer to spray this with, you know, a spray rig, a professional spray gun out of a compressor, totally understand, and you may have your own methodology. Just remember, this channel is mostly for the DIYers at home. I expect that you guys that are pros kind of know how you like to do things and have your own way. That's why we're going with just the aerosol cans of material, so that it's easy to replicate for folks at home. We got a little bit of a flat line right there, and I'm just going to use this block to follow that. A very light and delicate touch though, folks. I mean, it just does not take a lot of pressure. Alright, I think that is looking quite nice. Now what I'm gonna do very, very carefully, sometimes we will soften these body lines, like after I've kind of contoured everything, may just make one or two passes on that little hard edge there to soften it just a bit, which is how the factory, you can kind of feel it. Again, you can use your finger to kind of, you don't want a sharp line there and a rounded line somewhere else. And this just comes with practice. The more you do this, the better you are going to get. Some people have a natural knack for it. I'll soften that just a touch, and I'm using sandpaper that has been used a little bit, so this is not super sharp. Sometimes even with 600 grit, if it's brand new, it can cut surprisingly aggressively. Now I'm going to shift over. Scotch-Brite makes the different abrasive pads. That's the gray pad. I believe that's going to be the finer. I believe that's what they call the fine one, or the gray one. And I'm going to cut it just to, or tear it to kind of work for me, like what I need. This can be really good for just kind of going over everything a little bit outside of your primed area, and to give you a little bit of a surface on your cowling. This is a little more forgiving material on these edges, or at least in my experience it is. If you try to do this with sandpaper, sometimes you will end up sanding right through it, but this will take a little bit material off, but it's subtle, which is what we want at this phase. Now some people sometimes want to use like a steel wool or whatnot. I wouldn't recommend that. I don't like the idea of steel wool, although theoretically if that's the only thing you have, you just want to be really sure to clean it. Sometimes little fragments and bits of it, and if it gets trapped under the paint, it will rust over time, or it could cause rust. There is like a bronze wool available, you know, that would be better than steel wool, but I think using a synthetic material like these Scotch-Brite pads is going to be the way to go. It's the way we've done it and had lots of success. And what I'm doing again is I'm just softening these edges a little bit and making sure we're running our fade out onto the cowling a little further, so that when we do our color coat and our clear coat, there'll be a little texture there and we won't have any wax or contaminants causing an issue. We are almost done with this phase, folks. And again, most of our videos, we try to do them in real time. Not a lot of editing, so you get the full grasp of things. These are videos as if you were here in the boat shop and taking a class with us. Little Zep sprayers always. We use these 101 different ways. Spraying solvents and cleaners and soapy water solutions. You can see a little bit of that dust running off of there. That's from the Scotch-Brite pad, so it's a very mild abrasive, but it is an abrasive, and I think that looks pretty amazing at this point. Let me do a wipe down here, folks, and sometimes we'll take it out in the light and look at it a little closer. Natural light sometimes can be really, really good. We will let this dry. Now, use a little Wagner heat gun all the time here in the shop. Gotta be careful. You don't want to get this surface too hot. Sometimes when you dry it off, you can see exactly how far out you're feathering. You can see out here where we've sanded, it's lost its gloss, which is what we want. We might go out a little bit further out there so that when we blend our clear coat, you can see over here we got it's feathered out a little bit further. Same for over this way. Yeah, we're down pretty far down here. That's looking pretty good. I may run the blend out a little bit further. Yeah, I think that is looking pretty sharp. We can get a different camera angle over here. We can kind of see the contours and the edges against the light. I'm pretty pleased with that. So we've done a little more prep work, and we're getting to the point where we're getting ready to mask off our decals. Now, I know there's some people who probably be on the train of putting new decals on, as we mentioned before, but sometimes that's just not necessary, or it may not be in your budget. So what I like to do is kind of tape beyond the decal and then lightly score it. If you kind of hold the edge with your razor blade, it'll take that down nice. Plenty good for what we're doing. We're just going to be doing a little bit of clear coat down here. Again, I'm following this body line right to the edge. We're going to go beyond the decal, and you can kind of see there's a little outline. If you just use your fingernail, you can score the outline of the decal, and we're not cutting deep. We're not putting much pressure at all on there. We're just lightly scoring where my fingernail went, like one pass, and then just hold the edge where it starts, and it typically will come away pretty nice. Maybe not perfect every time, but again, we're not really going to be spraying down this far. Got a little bit of a semicircle, and again, you can see that little bit of an outline right there. Just a very light score will do the job. Sometimes you have to do one piece, then the next piece. Just a light score, a little pressure there at the edge, and it should come off. That's plenty good for what we're doing. I'm just going to push that in a little bit more. All right, so we can move on to doing a little bit of a solvent wipe down. We're using some of the de-waxer that we use here on the channel all the time. Always a good idea to put on some gloves. Trying to move through. Our afternoon is kind of flying away. Need to get this done. It does require a little bit of cure time between each coat. I've put some of this de-waxer in our little dispensers here so that it's a little bit easier on the application than pouring it out of the big jug. And we did go ahead and scuff all the way around. We kind of scuffed out a bit around the perimeter. You can see we've already masked off some of the other decals and sanded with the gray Scotch-Brite pad. I believe that's about a 1200 or 1500 grit. And good idea to just do a little cleaning at every phase, because sometimes oil from your skin when you're working with this stuff can contaminate. Things that are airborne contaminants can be a problem. Want this to be nice and clean. That is very important. Light wipe down, and then I like to turn the cloth inside and out. You got a fresh area, and let's go one more time. All right, not too shabby. Now we will move on to something else that's pretty important in this process. A tack cloth is a real good idea. That's gonna help pick up any particles, bits of dust. A lot of people aren't familiar with these unless you've grown up around the automotive paint and body world, but it's got a little tack to it, and it'll help pick up anything that might be on the surface, any kind of dust or residue. Prior to spraying, that is very important. We want things to be as nice and clean and uniform as possible. Right. I think that looks quite nice. Now we're going with the Yamaha lube. Always a good idea to shake your can vigorously. A lot of times they say up to like 2 minutes. And temperatures need to be up at least 70 degrees or so. Now, these things warn against using them around any kind of heat or anything, but if you can elevate the temperature a little bit of these cans, they will spray a little better. That may be putting them in the sun for just a few minutes, but again, you got to be super careful there, because they can explode if they get too hot. Good idea to have a mask anytime we're spraying. So we're going to start off fairly light and just kind of focused on the primer area. About 8 to 10 inches away. I like to always do a test fire. All right, let's see, here we go. Always lifting at the end. I'm just trying to stay right tight on the repaired area. Multiple light coats are better than a heavy. Don't expect to get full coverage on the first. All right, I think that's a good start. We're going to give it about 15 minutes, coat number 2. It has been 15 minutes. We're going for coat 2. Let's clear our nozzle a little bit. We are good to go. A little bit further out this time. Notice we're kind of just dusting it. You don't do these big, heavy fogging coats. And sometimes I will alternate, or else you'll get lines or streaks in it. So sometimes it's good to go horizontal and then switch back to vertical a little bit. But you're kind of just broadcasting the color rather than just fogging it on. So another 15 minutes, and I think we're going to go for coat number 3. Coat number 3. Test fire. Good to go. All right, we're going to give that about 30 to 45 minutes and get ready for some clear coat. We've given our base coat about 45 minutes or so to cure, and if you take a look at that, I am pretty pleased with the results overall. I think we got a nice shape to everything. We got good coverage. It seems nice and uniform. Now, one thing I typically like to do is go over with the tack rag, and I've already done it a little bit, but kind of just wipe the edges here. Some of that overspray a lot of times out on the outer edges. This paint has pretty much completely tacked off, but a lot of times out on the edges where you're going to be putting the clear coat, there will be overspray residue. So not a bad idea to tack rag everything. You can see we've picked up a little bit of material there. We've fully agitated our color. That's the color right. It's the 1K. Now they do make some 2-part. This is just a 1-part. They do make some 2-part. I wasn't able to find any locally, and I was kind of in a time crunch to get this, but I believe it's called Spray Max. It's a 2K. I'll try to put a link for it below. I've heard really, really good things about it. But this is what I have used in the past, and I've had good success with it. Fully agitated as always. I'm gonna wear a mask, and I'm just gonna do a very light coat initially. I've kind of had better results with that, and then we'll do probably 3 coats total, and then we'll build a little bit heavier each time. So, I always like to test fire a little bit, do a little spray. This has got a nice wide fan. And here we go, folks. I'm just gonna just a light dusting one direction then the other. Not very heavy at all. We're going to give that about 10 or 15 minutes to tack off, and then it's going to look worse before it looks better. But we'll get ready for coat 2 in a moment. Now I did decide to do a little more masking around the console after that first coat. This particular can, I think they may have changed the nozzle since last time I did it, but it did produce a lot more overspray than what I was expecting. So went ahead and just masked off the entirety of things. Kind of left a little flanged edge on here that'll kind of help with the transition. And gonna get ready for coat 2 at this point. Now it is important, again, to wear a mask for your clear coats because you're getting more overspray. We're going on a little bit heavier this time. Little test fire. All right, here we go, folks. All right, we'll give that a few minutes just to start to gloss out a little bit. Get ready for coat number 3. Come here and check out. Coat number 2 is looking good. We've got some gloss there. It's gonna get better with 3. We're gonna go heavier this time. Now, it's important to remember that between each pass, I am using a little tack rag and kind of cleaning up some of the overspray. It's like quite all right at this point after it's tacked off for about 10 or 15 minutes that you can wipe over, and sometimes there will be little bits of debris or a little bit of dry spray around the edges, and the tack rag will pick that up. And as we move out further and further, we'll kind of blend those edges, but that is an important step to remember. Here we go, folks. Went quite a bit heavier this time. Get full coverage is what we're shooting for. All right, folks, so we are right there at the end. That can is gone. Maybe I should have bought 2 cans. We're gonna give that a few minutes to level out, and I'll show you what she looks like. We've given it about 15 or 20 minutes to kind of clear out. Sometimes when you spray clear coat on out of aerosol, it'll be cloudy, and it can freak you out because you think it's gonna be terrible, but a lot of times it will level out if you give it a little time. I think that turned out pretty nice. It's not perfect. You know, if you were to load this in a spray rig and get some custom match paint, or I'm even curious to try like the 2K, the Spray Max. I'm gonna try to get some of that, and we'll try that in the future. But compared to having a gaping hole right through the side of our cowling, and considering these things are about 1,500 bucks, and if you could do this at home for a couple $100, that's worth considering. So I hope y'all enjoyed this episode. I don't know if, again, you can kind of pan in there and take a little closer look and see some of that gloss and shine. Now, after 3 to 5 days, you can do a little bit of wet sanding and polishing. And then after, I think it's about a week or so, you can actually put some wax over it if you want to. Every can or manufacturer is going to have a little bit of variation there. Just read the directions on the back and be sure you're following what they say. So if you're enjoying the content, folks, enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, comment, share. It's Captain Joe here with Fish Bump TV. My son Logan working hard behind the scenes is my amazing cameraman. And we'll catch you folks in the next episode.